Hello everyone and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Games. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Nathan Hale and Caleb Webb from Meetings on the Mound, a baseball podcast. Good afternoon, guys.
How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having us on.
I'm excited. I know how passionate you guys are about baseball, and I love seeing people take that passion to the next level and create things to talk about.
Yeah, it was kind of weird how the podcast kind of came about. Caleb is on my coaching staff. We're both high school coaches, and we just enjoy talking about baseball. And every time we would see each other, we would end up talking, in these long conversations about just different things. And eventually, it got to the point where our wives were kind of like, "Let's go," we need to go do something. So, one day we were like, let's do a podcast, and then we'll have an excuse to just get together and talk about baseball. And that's kind of the birth of the podcast. And then it really has gone places that I don't think either of us saw happening at the beginning. And it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, we've been able to talk to some really cool people and some really cool organizations. Couple of our favorites, the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, was an awesome interview. We were able to speak with Bob Kendrick twice, who's the president of that organization. The Myrtle Beach Pelicans, that was a fun interview. We were on location with the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. They invited us to their ballpark and gave us a tour and all that. So that was really cool. But we never thought we'd be able to talk to some of the people that we've talked to or met or made the connections that we've made. We figured we'd just get together and act like idiots and talk about a game that we love. And here it is a year later, and we're talking to some really awesome people.
I know. I love seeing that because life is too short not to do things you enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. We have obligations, we have responsibilities, you have things to do. And I think it's really important that people have hobbies, something that reminds them of what's the point of being alive if I'm not going to enjoy it?
Right. Yeah. And what I love about it is it's a hobby, but it's also constructive in that it allows other people to enjoy it as well. And it's an outlet that is, yes, it's for us. And honestly, we've said from the beginning, if nobody listens, that's okay, because we're just getting together for us.
And nobody listens.
And sometimes that feels like it's coming true. But in all reality, it's cool to see that there are other people that are like, oh yeah, I can't wait for you to put out a new episode or things like that. I'm a high school teacher, and at first, I never told my kids that I was doing a podcast, because as a high school teacher, you don't want to be the butt of all their jokes. So, I never put anything out. But
which you are anyway.
Some of the kids found it this last year, and they were like, Mr. Hale, that's a really good. You're really good at that. And I've had some kids that legitimately enjoy it and ask for new episodes and things like that. And
do they say I'm good?
No, or their parents, will come out and ask things. So it's just been cool to see that it is an outlet for us, and it's a hobby for us, but it's also really cool that it helps other people. It gives some other people content that they enjoy.
Yep.
So
I love that. And I love the camaraderie you two have, where you guys are serious about baseball, but not too serious. You have fun.
Yeah, we don't take ourselves too seriously, and we sometimes pretend like we like each other. Most of the time, we hate each other. But that's the life of a head coach, pitching coach, catcher's coach.
We're kind of like brothers in some ways, and kind of joke around. But in all reality, Caleb's been there for me at kind of my lowest points. I've been there for him, and we try and ultimately just. Love each other and kind of model for our team kind of what it's like to have, to be a friend and to be, there for somebody. I mean, we, like you said, we joke around with each other and we give each other a hard time, but at the end of the day, I know he's got my back if there's anything that I need. And so, modeling that for a team is big, but that kind of carries over to the podcast too, I think.
It does. Yep.
And I probably don't have to tell you guys this because you're coaches and you work with youth, but they're watching. They watch everything. And you have children. They pick up on every little thing.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And it goes kind of the way we carry ourselves too. We don't, like you said, we don't take ourselves too seriously. Baseball is sometimes, and we may get into this later in the interview, but I think sometimes baseball takes itself too seriously, and ultimately it's a game, and it's meant to be fun. And like you said, life is too short to not have fun and not to do things you enjoy. So if you're going to do something, whether that's baseball or whatever, you need to have fun with it and enjoy it.
And I think it's great that your students realize that you are doing this podcast, because I just remember thinking the adults I admired the most were the ones who had lives outside of their jobs and families. Not that family is not important, but you have other aspects of your identity that you need to embrace.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah, definitely.
That whether that be, hey, I volunteer, or I have a podcast, or I'm writing something, painting, whatever it may be. And that, I think that's a really good way to show your students and your team, hey, your life's not over after you graduate high school, college, you start working. Right. You can still have fun out there. You need to have fun.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. It rounds you off as a person. I see that in my students for sure, that they appreciate that.
Well, I know you guys have kind of told us a little bit about yourselves, but you want to take like a deeper dive?
Sure. I'll go first, I guess. I grew up here in Huntington, West Virginia, and went away to college. Honestly, I remember my senior year of high school. I was going to a school in Florida, and my plan was to play baseball. And the lady who set up the classes for the athletes called me during the summer and said, what are you planning to major in? And I had no idea, because I just wanted to go play baseball. So I said, well, I did well in history in school. I was a terrible student. It's kind of funny that I'm a teacher now, because I was such a bad student. But I was like, I like history. Do you have history education? And she said, well, we have social studies. So that was fine. So I kind of went ahead and did that. But then after I started taking education courses my freshman year, I realized that I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy being able to connect with kids. And I knew I wanted to be involved with baseball after college, and I knew that wasn't going to be in a playing atmosphere. And so it was natural for
suck.
Yeah, I wasn't very good. So it was kind of natural to take that next step into coaching. And I ended up, long story short, I ended up getting injured and couldn't really play in college, but I was able to work with the coaching staff and kind of be a student coach, and then was able to go from there and transferred back here to Huntington to Marshall University and finish up. And from there, I was able to do some really cool things. I was able to go to the Dominican Republic for a little bit, coach and teach there for a year, come back here. I got married and started coaching and teaching actually in the school that I graduated from. So some of those teachers that saw me as a poor student, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, now get to have me as a colleague. So that's been interesting for them, I'm sure, to see that. But the thing about that story that I think, as I tell it, that means the most to me is that you can't give up on kids, because a lot of people probably should have given up on me, because I was not a good student, and I had a lot going on in my life. My dad had passed away when I was younger, and my mom was raising me as a single mom, but I wasn't focused on school, and I wasn't a very good student. But I did have certain teachers, and some of those teachers, that's why I went into history education, because some of those history teachers were the ones that really connected with me and reached out to me. And now I look back, and when I have a student that's struggling, as frustrating as that is for every teacher, because we want to see our students succeed, it's very easy for me to go back and say, what, I was that kid, and how can I connect with that kid, and how can I throw a life raft to them and help them. And so, I do that with coaching, but I also do that, in the classroom as well. So that's a little bit about me, I guess.
I love that you allowed the struggles to not so much define you, but as to propel you into something greater. It takes a strong person to do that. It really does.
Yeah, thank you. It's not easy. There's a lot of times when it's you feel like you're just spinning your wheels, or things never work out. It's just easy to get down on yourself. And that's what we try and teach our kids is, in our program, in our coaching program, or in our baseball program rather. It's about, control what you can control, and there's certain things in life that you're not going to be able to control. And that sounds like a cliche to say it, but in all reality, things happen to us in life that we have no control over and that we can't do anything about. And if we sit there and just let them happen to us, at the end of the day, we're going to be no better off. But if we control the little aspects that we do control and go one step at a time forward, we can make the best of these situations.
Yeah, and not to jump, around these topics, but to echo what he said, that's something that we coach down to our kids is you control your controllables. So when you go up to bat and you've got a bad umpire who's calling pitches way outside and you can't get to those pitches, if you're not making adjustments at the plate, you're just going to be called out on strikes. That's just the way it is. And life's the same way. If you don't make adjustments in your life when life throws you a bad umpire, I mean, you're going to end up just striking out. So you have to make your adjustments in life to get around those bad calls or those bad things that life throws at you, and make the best of it. Turn a bad umpire into a CNI single to right field.
That is awesome. I love that metaphor. Gosh, baseball is a metaphor for life.
Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely.
That's why we love it.
I love it. I love it so much. Now, Nathan, do you prefer Nate or Nathan?
Either one, honestly.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure me and his wife are the only ones that call him Nate.
Oh, okay.
It's funny, honestly, my whole life I was Nathan, and then I went off to college, and it was like, I don't know, because I went to Florida for college, and so I don't know if it was because I had a little bit of a West Virginia accent at the time or what, but every time I would say Nathan, people would be like, Mason? And I was like, I just got tired of correcting it, so I was like, Nate, that's easier. I'll just go by Nate. So,
Did anybody
honestly,
think you were Mace?
No, nobody thought
are you saying Mace?
No one thought I was Mace, but I did work at a bank one time, and a lady honestly called me Mason, and I didn't have the heart to tell her, and so I just became Mason. So
Lady, you're an idiot. I'm not Mason. I'm Nathan.
So, yeah, I don't care. Nate or Nathan.
Chad.
Yeah, I was printed in the newspaper in the spring, and they called me Chad. So that's another option.
I mean, I could see those names being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get called Chelsea a lot.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah,
I can see
Chelsea.
That. I guess.
Yeah. Well,
doesn't make it any better, but.
Oh, it's okay. Sometimes I don't have the heart unless it's
Yeah.
some kind of official document. Like if it's a government document, please spell my name correctly. Well, thank you, Nathan, so much for that. That was really inspiring, and I'm really excited for the listeners to get some feel good, warm and fuzzies. Okay, Caleb, you got to bring the warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, definitely not as as Nate. Not as interesting either, I guess. But I grew up in the Navy. My dad was a navigator on an Ohio class nuclear sub, and baseball was kind of the thing that me and my brother would get along with. That's something that we shared. My dad was overseas 6 months at a time, so he was never home, and my brother was kind of a mentor to me, and one thing that we shared was a love for baseball, and that started at a young age. And growing up in the Navy, moving back, my dad left when I was a teenager, and similar to Nate, different circumstances, but similar, single mother and growing up without a dad in the home. It drives you to be different, I suppose. You have to learn things on your own. You have to do things on your own, things that your father may have taught you before. You don't get, so you have to make that up as you go. But I'm thankful that I had my brother, who's 4 years older than me, was like a father figure growing up, and even now we talk daily, and even now he's mentoring me, and he's 40, I'm 36, and it's just. That's the one thing I love about baseball is it brought me and him together like it did, and we've continued that relationship. I went to Marshall University as well. We moved back. My family's from the Huntington, West Virginia area. We moved back when I was a little younger, but I went to Marshall University, majored in economics with the idea that I was going to go into baseball afterwards. Like Nate, I sucked at baseball, so it's not something that I was going to make a career out of, at least playing wise. But I wanted to be in the front office and do something like that, and had an internship with the Pittsburgh Pirates, which was great, and just about maimed my favorite player of all time. Well, with the Pirates, it was pretty bad.
He threw a box of hats at him.
I was about to ask, like, okay, is it
it was. We'll get into that later. But it was an awesome experience, and it was something that I've always wanted to do is baseball, and I got to see a business side of baseball and the player side of baseball that you don't normally get to see as a fan when it comes to professional baseball. And I just wanted to do that. That's what I wanted to do for a living. And then I met my wife. We got married, had kids, and it was just harder and harder and harder to uproot my family. If you know anything about West Virginia, there's very little baseball here. And we just took a massive hit with one of our biggest affiliated teams just lost affiliation with Major League Baseball. So we don't even have that anymore. So it's difficult for West Virginians to have any kind of interaction with professional baseball. You have to drive 3 hours just to get professional baseball pretty much. So it's difficult. I wasn't able to get into that field, and this kind of scratches that itch. I met Nate through my wife. They worked together at the same school, and he asked if I wanted to come join his coaching staff, and I did, and we've been close ever since. He's been, like a brother to me, and he's been my best friend since then. And it's been baseball ever since. And now we're doing this, and heck, maybe trying to pivot that into something else. So we'll see.
I would love to see it become something just beyond your imagination.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
I would love it. And I'm not gonna lie. I don't know a whole lot about baseball, so please forgive me.
It's okay.
But you guys are the experts. So we've kind of touched on your background, some of your earliest memories of baseball, but what is it about America's pastime that you love the most? What is it? I mean, I know you guys probably like other sports too, but what is it about baseball that you felt the need to have a podcast about it?
For me, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, baseball is kind of a metaphor for life. It's a team sport, but it's an individual sport. And a lot like life, we're individuals, but we're existing within a society. And we have teams, whether that be your school or your church or your family or your social group. And that's your team, and that's who you're around. But at the end of the day, when the rent's due, it's an individual sport. And that's kind of how life is, and that's kind of how baseball is. Ultimately, it comes down to a pitcher versus a batter. And, what are you going to do in your at bat? And what are you going to do if the ball's hit to you? And your individual output and how that then affects the team. And you get into, life, and you realize that, you sometimes you feel alone. Sometimes you sit in the batter's box and you feel alone, but you're not. And you have to learn how to rely on those other people in your life. And so to me, it is a metaphor for life. And there are other sports that will, claim the same thing. And I agree, other sports have their points there. But, I like that it's individual, but it's team. And I like that, there's no clock. You have to beat the other team. If you're going to win the game, you have to do better than the other team. You can't run out the clock. You can't, go hide in the corner. You have to go out and actively, try and beat the other team, which again, in life, a lot of times you can't just hide from your problems and hope they go away. When the time runs out, you have to go, conquer them. So, that's kind of my take on
it. Mine's very similar. Now, I grew up with the game. It was something that, again, me and my brother really loved. But it really is a metaphor for life in so many different ways. We touched on it earlier with you got to make adjustments when life throws you something that you're not ready for. And if you don't make those adjustments, you're just going to be called out at the plate. but it also gives you hope. So like Nate was saying, there's no time, there's no clock. The game's over when the last pitch is thrown and the last out is recorded. That means there's always hope. It doesn't matter what kind of odds you're going up against. You could be down 20-0 and you're going to still win that ball game. There's no game over until the game's literally over. And you can be down to your final strike, down 4 runs, and still win that ball game. And that's how I think it's great to approach life. So when you're approaching life with the idea that there is no lead that's not insurmountable, there's no lead that I can't break, there's no obstacle that I can't climb over, you're just going to be a better person for it. And I think baseball's the perfect metaphor for that. And that's something that I love about that game.
And to kind of piggyback on that, you have to, in order to overcome those leads, you have to rely on those on your team. Just like in life, you have to rely on the people around you. You can't do it alone. And I remember in college we lost a game 35-7, which is really bad in baseball.
That was your fault, wasn't it?
It was. I didn't play. We lost 35-7, but the next time we played that team, we won. 7-4. So it again, not to kind of just pound home the same point, but there is no clock. You have to get the last out, and no matter what, at the end of the day, you and your teammates are the ones that decide kind of the outcome there.
And one thing that's unique about the game of baseball, you look at football, you look at basketball, you look at soccer to a lesser extent, but all these other team sports, they have specific plays and specific game plans that are specific to that team, to that scheme, to that whatever that team's trying to do. Baseball's not like that. I mean, you have it to a certain extent, but I can have one guy in one dugout for one inning, go to the other dugout, put on a different uniform, and play the game the exact same way. So everybody's on an even playing field. No matter what, you're going out, you're playing the same exact game. It's played the same way by every single person. Some people may be more physically gifted than others. Some people may just be more athletic than others. Some people might be smarter than others. But when it comes down to it, the game is fair. And there will be curveballs again. That might seem unfair, bad umpires or bad hops. Ball hits a rock that shouldn't be there. But that's life too. So it's a game governed by objective rules that might end up throwing a curveball at you every once in a while. So again, it's the perfect metaphor for life.
And one of the cool things that kind of goes with that is the fact that a lot of people don't realize this, but back in like the 30s and 40s, players would leave their gloves on the field, and then the next team, when they would go out into the field, they would use the same glove. So you would use the same glove for both teams. And so, that just kind of speaks to the fact that even in the origins of the game, it was a level playing field. It wasn't, you're going to get an advantage because you have different equipment. Everybody used the same gloves, and, it's funny to think about that now because you think of these players that are, making millions of dollars. It'd be kind of silly for them to like leave their glove on the field and then, come in and go. But like, again, that's just, it's the same rules for everybody. And that's what makes it beautiful.
Whenever I think of baseball, I just think of how much it's woven into our culture. In the NFL, I think sometimes it gets the largest share of attention. I don't know if it's the marketing, the excitement, the scandals. I don't know what it is. But whenever I think of baseball, I think back to even when kids are little and their mom or dad wants to go, hey, let's go and throw the ball and practice catching at the mitt. Just wholesome things like that. And I know that baseball has had some sordid moments in its past with steroid use and whatever, that's on the player. But overall, it seems like such a wholesome sport. Mm-hmm. Is that an incorrect interpretation?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And we've actually talked about this on our podcast before. Baseball is a relational sport. Mm-hmm. It's a sport where you are, and most people that love baseball, when you talk to them, they all have a story about how they got into the game and how they fell in love with baseball. And whether it was, Caleb and his brother, or me and my brother, or me and my dad, and it's a game that families a lot of times teach each other, or friends teach each other. And so, kids playing in a sandlot, type of thing, or playing in the neighborhood or playing in the street. Like, that is what baseball is all about, and it's a relational sport. And it kind of goes back to that not having a clock where, if you go to a baseball game, and I've had people that are like, because they know I like baseball, and, they'll be talking to me and they'll say things like, well, I can't watch a game on TV, but going to a game is a lot. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes games on TV are boring, but when you're at a baseball game and, it's a warm summer night and there's hot dogs and, cold drinks, and you're able to kind of sit there and watch a game with somebody next to you, and just the pace of the game allows you to build a relationship with them. It's not like football where, I went to a football game Friday night and it was enjoyable, but ultimately, the only time I was able to talk to the person next to me was like in between plays. I might have 10 seconds, and that's if the crowd's not loud. In a baseball game, it's a little bit slower paced, and you have in between pitches and you have in between innings, and there's time to build that relationship with the people around you, which also builds those memories. And so I think to say it's a wholesome sport, I think you're absolutely right. It's built on relationships.
And that's not to say that there's not a bruised history when it comes to the game.
Oh yeah.
We talked a little bit about the Negro Leagues earlier, and when you go back and you can listen to some of those episodes, if I try to tell some of those stories, I can't do these stories justice like Bob Kendrick can. But when you look at the history, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that separation between white America and black America. And it was so distinct that, at the ballpark, if you had crowds of white people on one side, you had them separated from black fans with chicken wire. And that's one cool thing about the Negro League Museum is everything is separated by chicken wire to kind of illustrate that. And Bob Kendrick would tell a story that I love this story about Satchel Paige. They were playing a team of goodness, I can't remember who they were playing. It was an all white team, and somebody came out of the dugout and started saying some racial slurs to Satchel Paige, and he told his fielders to come in. And they came in a little bit. The infielders played in a little bit. The outfielders played in a little bit. And he said, no, all the way in. So they all came in and sat around the pitcher's mound while Satchel Paige struck out the side. So it's a game that transcends race, relations, color, whatever. It just transcends, and it makes everything an even playing ground. So it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, or whatever. I just got to be better than you. And if I can strike you out, I don't care who you are, who you think you are, I've got you right now. And the next time out, you might hit a 500-foot bomb and do a bat flip on me, and that's okay too. But that's something that I love about this game is I don't care where you come from, who you are, what your upbringing is. There's a lot of people that came from rich American homes, and a lot of people that grew up playing in the streets of the Dominican Republic with milk jugs as gloves, all playing the same game at the same level right now in Major League Baseball. And that's just an awesome thing to think of. So there are natural inequalities in the world, and baseball evens that out.
That's beautiful. And was baseball, please forgive me if I'm wrong, but whenever I think of how you were talking about the inclusion of African Americans, I think of Jackie Robinson. Was he the first black baseball player
in Major League Baseball? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there was actually an African American that played in Toledo, and I think the end of the 1800s. He played a couple of games, but that wasn't. It was professional baseball, but it wasn't Major League Baseball in the same way. So technically, Jackie Robinson, that's the one that he really did. Fleetwood Walker kind of played some games, but yeah, Jackie Robinson is the first.
And I guess we take it for granted because, well, we're white and we're also living in 2020. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was back then. But I can't even imagine the amount of bravery
right
it took for him and any other black players.
Oh yeah, and it's crazy talking to Bob and hearing the stories of these players that, were better than the players that were in the major leagues, but they were, they just loved the game and they wanted to play. And so, that's how the Negro League started. But even, going beyond that, when Jackie Robinson did break into baseball, he's just playing a game and he's being threatened with death, and he's, being, told these things, and his team isn't, there's a story of the Dodgers that go to a hotel and the hotel wouldn't let Jackie stay there. So the whole team said, well, we're not staying here either. And they left and went to another hotel. And, just the courage that he had. And it would have been so easy, I think, for any of us if we were put in that position to say, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm not going to put my life on the line for a game. But ultimately he saw that it was bigger than him, and it was bigger than just that game, because he could play. Not only did baseball allow other players like him, other players that had been excluded to play, but now we are, in 2020, and a large portion of baseball is Hispanic players that would have never gotten the opportunity to play. You never would have had the game grow in the way that it did if it hadn't been for players like Jackie Robinson and some of the other greats that really showed that courage.
Yeah, and now you see what, 12 to 14 countries represented in Major League Baseball, across South America, Asia, Europe, and North America. So the game's grown globally really, really well. Now we could probably talk all day about how it's grown domestically, and we're not going to get into that. But again, it harkens to that idea that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. The game is the game.
That's awesome. I love hearing that, and I would love to know. Okay, so I know, Caleb, you're a big Cubs fan.
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of go back to maybe who were your favorite teams? What caused you to fall in love with these teams? Whether it would be the players, the memories, the location, whatever it is. I mean, I don't know if you guys want to be like, oh, I don't have a favorite team. I love them all equally.
No, we're pretty vocal about our our favorite teams, and some of us are a little more harsh about our teams than others. But I'm a Cubs fan because again, I grew up in the Navy, and Virginia Beach, Charleston, South Carolina, and Georgia, there really wasn't a whole lot of baseball to watch. If I wanted to watch a game of baseball, it was on WGN. WGN baseball carried the Chicago Cubs. My entire family, they're all Cincinnati Reds fans. My brother's Cincinnati Reds fans. My uncle's a Cincinnati Reds fan. My aunts are Cincinnati Reds fans. His kids, my brother's kids, are Cincinnati Reds fans, and I'm the only Cubs fan in my family. It's kind of odd, but I grew up with WGN, so I'd wake up in the morning if I wasn't in school, and I'd watch, especially during the summer, I'd watch, Bozo the Clown on WGN, and then a movie or something, and then 120 baseball on WGN at Wrigley Field, and I loved it. That's one of the ways I fell in love with the game is that national spotlight on this single team with so much history and so much tradition, and it just stuck with me. And I mean, one of my earliest memories is seeing Andre Dawson throwing bats onto a field after getting thrown out of a game. So he went into the dugout and took all the baseball bats, and threw it out on the field. I think I was like 6 or 7 years old. It's one of my first memories. And
not a good example for kids, but
it isn't.
That would stick out in my mind too.
Yeah. You're like, oh, everything we just said about it being, a good thing for, wholesome. Yeah. Just kidding.
Jerk. Anyway, but that's that was one of my favorite memories. It's one of my earliest memories with the game, and oddly enough, one of probably my earliest professional memory is with the Cincinnati Reds when they won the World Series in 1990. He wasn't born. And you weren't born. But you were born.
Yeah.
You just don't remember.
I was 6 months old.
You don't remember it. But I remember that game. I remember Barry Larkin doing a backflip after they make the final out. And it was just... I'm shocked that I didn't become a Reds fan because it's so ingrained in my family. but I just went the way of the Cubs, and it's always been that way. I've just been a Cubs fan.
Yeah, I've always been a Reds fan. There's baby pictures of me in a Reds uniform. My dad was a big Reds fan, and so was my brother. And so, just kind of growing up, that's the team our family cheered for, and that was really kind of the only option I had growing up. I felt, but I fell in love with the stories that my dad would tell about some of the great old teams that he watched play, and then a lot of credit goes to my mom. My dad, like I said earlier, passed away when I was 10. So from that point on, it would have been really easy for, my mom doesn't really like baseball. So it would have been really easy for her to not, try to carry that on. But she took me to a game, and Cincinnati's about 2.5, 3 hours away. And, she would take me to a game once, twice, 3 times a summer. And we would go to Cincinnati for the weekend, and we would watch a 3-game set. And back then I'm thinking, mom's taking me to the game because she enjoys it. But now I look back and I'm like, she was miserable for those hours because she didn't really like the game of baseball. And she had raised 3 kids, or I was the third kid, and I was the youngest by a wide margin. So it would have been so easy for her to kind of be like, we'll do something else, we'll do other activities. But she knew that I had a passion about baseball, and she knew that my dad had a passion about baseball, and it was important for him to kind of pass that on to me. So, I just kind of became a Reds fan by through that and through the experience of getting to go to those games and see those players. And, I don't know, it's just, I guess, kind of meant to be.
So what would you say is your favorite baseball game that you've ever attended? Like if someone said, "Oh my God, what was the most monumental game you've ever attended?" What's the first one that comes to mind?
So for me,
the Reds suck. So there's really not.
It's so bad.
Good or bad?
Yeah. I went to a playoff game and they lost. Honestly, it's not even, and I love the Reds are definitely my favorite team, but honestly, it goes probably my favorite game that I attended is probably a game in a playoff game in the Dominican Republic. My brother lives in the Dominican Republic, and I've been able to go over there several times. And I was able to go over one time when the team in his town was in the playoffs. And Dominican winter ball is where a lot of players from the States will go over, and they'll play in the winter, and they will kind of work on their craft and try and get better. And but Dominicans are crazy about baseball. And so if you watch, if you see highlights of like European soccer where they're like chanting, it's like that, but with baseball. And so, there's cowbells and horns and, people screaming and dancing, and it's such a cool atmosphere. But the town that he is in, they hadn't won a championship in 60 years. And there was, always talk about how the owner was getting, he would bet against the team and then, cause them to lose on purpose. And like, there's all these rumors about, all that. But I was able to be there one year when they made the playoffs, and to see the town kind of come together and be in that atmosphere. And, they won on a walk-off inside the park home run. That was just, it was the coolest thing. So it's not American baseball, but that's definitely the best baseball game I've ever been to, as far as, just that was so cool. Another great baseball game I was at, a player on the Reds hit 3 home runs against the Pirates, and I just do not like the Pirates at all whatsoever. And so, he hit the home runs, and he strutted around the bases, and it was just,
That wasn't the game that we went to where Javi Baez hit a grand slam. You remember that?
That was the Cubs.
The Cubs one.
Yeah, so the Pirates one, that was fun. Yeah, those are probably the ones for me.
The Reds suck. Now, for me, 1998, I'm not sure if you remember this or not, but that was the year of the big home run race. So you had Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire. Don't try to.
You weren't thinking of the names.
I almost said Barry Bonds. I don't know why. But McGwire and Sammy Sosa had a big home run race in 1998. So before that, the record was 61 home runs set by Roger Maris in, 1960? And Babe Ruth had the record before that with 60 home runs. So up to 1998, only 2 guys have ever hit 60 home runs or more in a baseball season. That year, Mark McGwire hit 60 first, and then I was at the game in 1998 when Sammy Sosa hit his 60th. So I got to see the only the fourth player in Major League history to ever hit 60 home runs or more, which was really cool. And it was a game that the Cubs were losing bad. It was against the Brewers, and we hate the Brewers. We hate the Pirates. We hate the Cardinals. That's one thing that we have. We hate all these teams.
I've just maybe like somebody's gonna listen to this episode and be like, "We got to change his mind. Let's contact meetings on the mound."
Just probably don't like our team either. So
no,
it's all in love,
equal.
But
yeah. But, except for Cardinal fans, you guys you just go away. But I kid, not really. It was a game that the Cubs were losing pretty badly. I think they were down 8 runs in the 6th or 7th inning, and Sammy Sosa hit that 60th home run, and the place it was electric, and it just fired the team up in a way that I've never seen a team get fired up just by one swing of the bat. The crowd was in it the rest of the game, and the Cubs ended up coming back and winning that game in extra innings, and it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And it was the last game I saw with my dad before he left, and I think it was kind of one of those trying to make something up to your son, blah blah blah, but then he kind of just disappeared. And I'll always remember that. It was just me and my dad who just took a random trip to Wrigley Field and saw Sammy Sosa hit number 60, and it's always going to stay with me.
That is so awesome. And whenever we're kids or teenagers, just those moments I find stand out so much stronger in our minds. I don't know what it is, these awesome moments in time, these memories. Mm-hmm. Now, Nathan, you might have answered this question already because you said you've been to the Dominican Republic, but maybe you have a different answer, and I'm curious. So with baseball being in different countries, is there a particular culture's baseball game that you guys would like to see more than any others?
I think because I've already seen baseball in the Dominican, baseball in the Dominican is my favorite just because to me it gets back to that pureness. It gets back to that just kids playing in the street. Now, they're playing because it's a very poor country, and the goal is to get off the island, and so there's definitely an urgency there and a desire to make it for your family and to make it so that you can provide for your family. But at the end of the day, the kids also love playing the game, and they play it with such a joy. And they are out there playing with a milk carton on their hand, though it's a glove. So I love Dominican baseball. That's what I want to. I wish I could bring that back and bring that sense of joy and urgency and that curious mixture that they have to the States. But I think for me, I would love to see baseball in Japan because it's very unique. Their style of baseball is a little unique, and I've watched Japanese baseball, but I've never been to Japan, so I've never seen a game. But I think for me, I would love to go to a Japanese baseball game.
And I think it's probably the same with me. I mean, I'd love to go and see a game in the Dominican Republic. That's probably my number one. I get to kind of live it vicariously through Nate when he tells me all these great stories about how he had dinner at McDonald's with Robinson Cano.
I did.
But yeah, Japan, it's very similar to American baseball in that they look at their stars as superstars, almost like untouchable rock stars. Dominican Republic, everybody's approachable. The game's approachable. It's just everybody's there to enjoy the game, and they know what they're there to enjoy. So you look at something like Yu Darvish, who was a star for I forget who he played for in Japan, but we came over to the Texas Rangers, and he's a superstar over there. I mean, he's got on Twitter like millions of followers. I mean, everybody loves Yu Darvish. It's the same with Ichiro Suzuki. Everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. And it's the same way in the Dominican. Only, I mean, it's not. You don't have a million Twitter followers for these guys in the Dominican. They love their team, they love their community, they love the game. And
yeah, you can be walking down the street and see, a all-star, playing dominoes with his friends where he grew up, in the off season.
So he hasn't forgotten where he's come from.
Yeah, exactly. They don't forget where they come from, and they're quick to go back. Now, when they go back, it's always funny in the off season. There's all of a sudden a lot of luxury cars, driving on the streets that aren't there during baseball season because they obviously have money and they're spending, but they don't forget where they come from, and they're very and that's Latin culture where family is so important, and extended family is so important. So
that's so awesome. I did notice my first baseball game was in 2018. We went to Petco Park to see the Padres play against the San Francisco. What's the San Francisco team called? Just
Giants.
Okay, so I could not remember, and that was just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be there, and just the fun little in between plays things that would happen, and to see the little Padre mascot, the
Friar Tuck.
Yes, Friar. He was walking around, and because my dad's from San Diego, so it was really cool to kind of see that part of his childhood. And then last year we went to a Cubs game, but before the Cubs game, we went on a tour.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, maybe I did know that. I think I knew that.
Oh my gosh, I have to say, I think I liked that even more than the game. The game was cool. You Darvish was playing. That was awesome, but just the history. And you guys might love this, and I think this might be your dream job. The gentleman was a retired lawyer, and he said that was his job now, that he was doing what he loved, was giving tours.
Yeah. No, I've talked to my wife when I retire from teaching and coaching, like, I've had ushers tell me too, like, well, yeah, I retired from being a teacher or whatever. I'm like, you're living the dream. You're retired and you get to watch baseball and, help people to their seat. Like, that's perfect. Or do the tours. I've never done a tour at Wrigley. I've done one in the Red Stadium, and I've done one in Pittsburgh for their stadium. Even though I don't like their team, they have a beautiful ballpark. And so it's I would highly recommend anybody, whether you're a baseball fan or not, go on a ballpark tour because you get great access, and it's so cool to see like the stadiums and the history and all that.
Yeah,
I loved it. So if there's a stadium you have not been to, is there a stadium on your list that you would like to visit?
For me, I've got two. I was able to go to Old Yankee Stadium before they tore it down. Wow. And that was a really historic stadium because that's where like Babe Ruth played and Mickey Mantle and all the greats, played in that park. And so I was able to go there in one of the last seasons before they tore it down when I was younger, which was really cool.
It's such a Yankee thing to turn a historic ballpark into a
parking lot. Yeah.
Sounds like a song that we know.
Yeah, exactly. Paradise. And so, the Yankee Stadium was cool. I've never been to Fenway Park in Boston, and I've never been to Wrigley. And so both of those are definitely on my list because of the history and because I love the game. I love the history of the game. To be able to watch a game, where these players played is just so cool to me. And I'm a history teacher, so I love history. I love, when I'm at these places that are historic, I love just thinking about like how many people have sat with the same vantage point I have, and watched this game, and what are their lives like, and what was it like watching the same game. Baseball is basically the same game as it was 75, 80 years ago for the most part, and I'm watching the same game that somebody did that lived during World War II. Like, that's just I don't know, it's cool to me to be able to do that, especially with baseball. And baseball is really one of the few sports with historic ballparks. Football, there's a couple like Soldier Field in Chicago, but it's not really the same. It doesn't have the same allure as like a baseball park.
Right.
And basketball doesn't really have that. So it's really cool to have these historic ballparks that it's like all these greats played here, and people came and saw games here just like I'm coming to see games here today.
Yeah, and my answer is probably fairly similar. I'd love to go to Fenway. Fenway, it was built, 1912? Something like that?
Something like that.
So it's over 100 years old. And, I mean, I've been to Wrigley. I've seen Wrigley, and not that I don't want to go back. It's like Mecca for me in terms of baseball. If I could go there annually, I would. If I could live in right field, I would. But Fenway, I'd love to go and see Fenway, but I'd also love to go and see Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
Dodger Stadium, it's the only stadium the Dodgers have played in after moving from Brooklyn. So they were the Brooklyn Dodgers for pretty much their entire existence until they moved out to LA, and they've been in that stadium ever since. So there's still a lot of history there. It's not near as old as say Wrigley Field or Fenway, but I think it was built in like the early 60s. Still a ton of history there. And a lot of great ball players have come in and out of that stadium, and I'd love to go and see that.
And one thing, just kind of to go off that, I love the little details of all these stadiums and how different stadiums have different stories. And one of the coolest things about LA is if you see a picture of their stadium, their seats are arranged to look like the ocean. So like the seats down close, I think, are the ones that are like blue, and then as it gets higher, it gets lighter blue, and then it's like the sand, so it gets to be like tan. And so it's like little details like that with baseball parks, that like little architectural nods to history or to the culture around that area that I think make it unique. And it's just kind of speaks to the uniqueness of baseball to me.
Yep.
I really love how you guys were talking about being there at the same time as people from other generations and other time periods. That sends chills down my spine, because it sounds like things you would read just about in storybooks, but to actually be there where history has happened, you can almost feel the ghost of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm sure you've heard of Babe Ruth calling a shot in the World Series, the famous home run. That was Wrigley Field, and that stadium is still there. That field is still there. The ground that Babe Ruth walked on during that World Series, that's still there. That's where players are playing right now, and it's just really cool. I mean, I know Babe Ruth wasn't a Cub, but you got all these Cub legends that were there. Frank Chance and going all the way up, Ron Santo and Fergie Jenkins and Ernie Banks, all these greats that played on that turf. And now, our favorite players are playing there, and it's you're right. It's like the ghosts of history are still there, and that's a common theme in baseball movies and things like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, baseball movies. There's a famous quote. I think it's from. Now I'm gonna blank. I think it's from For the Love of the Game, but he basically says it's really hard not to be romantic about baseball, or how can you not be romantic about baseball? And I think it goes back to that idea of just the ghosts of the past, but also the stars of the future and the stars of the present. The movie Field of Dreams is my favorite movie, and in that movie, it's a story about a father and son, but the whole idea is these ghosts come and play baseball, and they just want to play baseball, and so they come out on this field and play baseball. So, I think that is prevalent. The idea of these figures that are larger than life today, are getting the opportunity, or we get the opportunity to watch stars today that were playing in the same place as these stars that are larger than life from yesteryear that are playing.
Yeah, some of these stadiums, you can almost call them our Gettysburg. You go to Gettysburg and you see this battlefield that, that's such an important battlefield in our history. And in a sense, these are also battlegrounds.
Obviously less important. So listen, I'm just saying it's not as important as Gettysburg.
I'm not saying it is. Sure.
They're going to clip that and put it on social media, and you're getting canceled.
Wow. I've already been canceled, so I can weather that.
If people can't understand the poetic devices, I'll teach you guys. Come on. We'll learn something poetic.
I'm not saying it's as important as Gettysburg, you jerk. But like Gettysburg, you go to that battlefield and you almost feel the ghost of the past, the history, that bloody history that's there. But then you go to somewhere like Wrigley Field and you've got those same ghosts, but that bloody history doesn't exist. And it's more of a great history rather than something that, it's a sad history or a tragic history as would be a battleground. And it's woven into American history, and it's just I think it's unique to baseball and baseball only.
You bring up a good point about history, because I notice a lot of times we tend to focus on the negatives. It's very easy, kind of like the news cycle.
Mhm.
It's very easy to get caught in, what is it, doom scrolling, where you just keep looking up bad news after bad news. And it's really easy to focus on the horrible things that have happened in history. And we have to acknowledge them. Yes, we can't bury them. We have to move on. We have to learn so we can be better people. But we also have to acknowledge the positives, like you're saying, Caleb, with baseball. There are beautiful parts of history that I think get kind of brushed aside because I guess they don't attract as much attention. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's one thing that there's a lot about baseball in current Major League Baseball that we like to gripe about because we think that, maybe they're not doing the right things and, growing the game or whatever. But as far as the leadership of baseball, but one thing I love about baseball is it is connected to the past in a way that's very different from all the other sports. Records in baseball mean more because, everybody knows, nobody knows who is the all-time, the all-time best. And pick another sport and pick their all-time leader, and half the people may not know it.
Another sport.
I can't, right? But like baseball, everybody knows, Barry Bonds, or everybody knows Babe Ruth, or some of these players, and it goes back to that relationship with the game and how it's passed down. But I think it also goes back to just baseball reveres its past, and I think that's a good thing. And there are a lot of positives about baseball. There's I think of the moments like the Lou Gehrig speech where he says, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And he's a guy that knows he's going to die soon, but he considers the fact that he was able to play Major League Baseball, and he's out there with his friends and his teammates, and he considers himself to be the luckiest guy on the face of the earth, when most people would look at him and say, man, that kind of sucks. You're right in the middle of your career and you get this disease that at the time nobody knew what it was. And, and you're gonna die. And he still considered himself that lucky. And that speech, or there's a famous play where somebody was going to burn an American flag in the outfield, and a player ran in and grabbed the flag and ran away. And it was just kind of a cool moment that that he was going to do that. So but baseball does a good job of reminding people of the past, and they do cool things when those dates come up. They do a good job of kind of rekindling that and reminding people of what it was like.
Oh my gosh, I got shivers. That was so good. Oh, but how does your passion for the sport translate to your coaching philosophies? You both touched on it a little bit at the beginning in your introductions, but I would love to learn more about coaching.
So for me, it's all about relationships. It's kind of a cliche. Everybody always says it, but it's really true. Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and they don't care that you know more about the game of baseball, or how to break down a swing, or how to help them pitch better, unless they know that you're actually in their corner and they know that you're there for them. And so that's job one for me in coaching, is being there for the kids and letting them know it's bigger than baseball. And a lot of coaches will tell you it's bigger than baseball, or it's bigger than wins and losses, but then their actions kind of go the other way. And I've known coaches like that. And for me, I've had kids come to me before and say, I can't be at practice because I have a test. And, to me, I'll every time tell that kid, go study for the test, because that is more important to me than baseball. And as passionate, and kids see that I'm passionate about baseball. They know that I'm not just doing it as a hobby. They know it's part of my life. But when I'm willing to say that as important as baseball is to me, your education is more important, or as important as baseball is to me, your family is more important. I think that allows them to see and put things in proper priority, and they're able to understand that. So for me, for coaching, baseball is a top priority, but it's not the top priority in life. Most of the kids I coach, as great as they think they may be one day, and how as great as I hope that they will be one day, just statistically speaking, they're not going to be major leaguers. And so they have to be ready for life after baseball. And so, rather than baseball being the end game, baseball kind of becomes a tool to prepare them for the end game, the game of life. And that's what I try and how I try to coach and prepare our kids.
It's about the same. We have a very similar philosophy, and I think that's why we mesh so well on the field. Is we want to build those relationships with those kids, and with me, it's a little different. I'm not a teacher, so I only have a couple of hours a day to really get to know these kids. I get the locker room, and then I get the field, and during that time, I've got to instill in them the idea of what Nate was saying. Baseball is important, but there's, like my personal philosophy, for example, is God, family, baseball, in that order. And there are things in life that are more important than the game. The game just takes you there, and it's a great learning experience for life, and a great, like we've been saying, is a great metaphor for life. And so I've got to be able to compact that down into 2 hours, and sometimes that's very difficult to do, and that's why building relationships is so important. Having a kid come up to you after practice or after a game, say, "Hey, coach, can we work on my change up, or can we work on my my throws to second, or something like that." It's a different idea that I can get them to trust that what I'm doing for them is for the best. It may not feel right, it may not look good at the time, but they trust that I'm doing what's best for them, what's best for their future in the game, and what's best for their future in life. And going back to our kind of our team motto, control your controllables, make adjustments when you can. Where you're not ready for the bad calls or the bad pitches or whatever, you've got to make adjustments to remedy that problem. And that's kind of our approach, and I think it's important when you're growing young boys into young men.
That's a really great philosophy. And you guys remind me of that quote. I think it was Maya Angelou who said, "People may not remember what you said, people may not remember what you did, but they're going to remember how you made them feel."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Think about people in your lives who, I don't remember what this teacher said when I was in 6th grade, but I remember they encouraged me, or
Mm-hmm.
they cared about something going on in my life with my family. Just little things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of where our philosophy too kind of brings in, we believe that baseball should be fun because, we've all been on those teams where adults are taking it too seriously, and I think sports sometimes gets a bad rap for that. You see the videos on Facebook or Twitter where somebody, parents are getting kicked out of a game or fighting with each other, something like that, like terrible moments in sports. And it's like, that's just ruining it for the kids because the grown-ups are taking it too seriously. And I think that's why, I don't want our kids to be scared of failure. And that's another reason I love baseball, is because baseball is a game of failure. So what I mean by that is you strike out or you get out 7 times out of 10, and that means you got to hit 3 times out of 10. Well, if that's the case, you're batting 300 and you're a Hall of Famer. You're going to the Hall of Fame because you got to hit 3 times out of 10. It's a game you have to learn to deal with failure. And so one way we learn to deal with failure is we have fun, and not that we have fun failing, but we have fun, and we bring fun into it.
We do have fun failing.
Sometimes we have fun failing, but we bring fun into it because one thing I see in the classroom, and my wife's a teacher too, at a different school, but she sees it as well, and we kind of talk about it. Is kids sometimes are scared to fail, and I think it's because of social media and because we compare each other to other people, and we kind of get in this mindset, and we get very competitive, and we're so scared to fail. And in reality, failure is where you grow so many times in life, and failure is where you learn what didn't work. So the famous Edison quote, I didn't fail however many times to make a light bulb, I figured out how many ways to not make a light bulb. And that's so true in life, but it's also true in baseball. And out of that failure, you also learn to be creative, and you learn to make some amazing plays. And that's another thing about baseball and all sports, but what I love about baseball is you can be creative and you can kind of learn how to do things. And I just think that, our generation, that the generations that are coming up need that, because they need to learn how to fail, that it's not over if you strike out. It's not over if, you get out. The game goes on, life goes on, and you learn how to grow from that. But then you can also, within that, be creative and learn to do things that you didn't think were possible or you didn't think you could do. And
two, baseball, in my view, it's a sanctuary. That field is a sanctuary for we don't know what some of these kids are going through at home. We might get an idea. Nate would have a better idea as a teacher, as seeing them every day and spending a lot more time than maybe I would. But there's a lot of times that even he may not know what's going on at home, and this is an escape for them. So if there is something bad at home or something going on that they're worried about or scared about or nervous about, baseball's a game that you have to turn it off. Mm-hmm. If you're thinking about the things outside of the game, that failing 3 out of or 7 out of 10 times, it's going to be 9 out of 10 times. It's a mental game. It really is. And it teaches you, I don't want to say meditation, but it's almost a meditative idea that you've got to shut it down. You've got to shut everything off and focus on that pitch that's coming, or the batter that you're facing, the pitch that you're getting ready to throw, or what am I going to do with the ball when it comes to me? So you got to shut everything else out and focus on the moment. So that becomes almost a sanctuary. Now, if coaches are a little too hard or too difficult or have too high of expectations of their players, that's no longer a sanctuary. It becomes another battleground for them. And that's part of building that relationship. We have expectations. We have high expectations of our kids. We don't have unreasonable expectations. We'll have stretch goals, but all we ask is that you give 100%. If you're walking out to left field, get your butt back on the bench. If you're walking out a pop fly, get your butt back on the bench. But if you're running out a ground ball that you just tapped back to the pitcher, you swung out of your shoes, and you tried as hard as you could to make a good play, make a good out, or whatever, we're not going to get onto you. We may take you aside and say, well, you kind of threw out of your swing there, or you were out of your hips, or whatever the case may be, to try to correct course. But we're not going to come down on you if you are doing what we asked you to do.
And even if we do put you on the bench, you're not on the bench for the rest of your life. I mean, that's a short thing, and it's hey, let's and we're not going to leave you there. We're going to come over and we're going to sit next to you and we're going to say, hey, listen, so this is why we do this, and this is what we want to do. And that's another really kind of, not to keep going off on branches of our coaching philosophy, but the why and explaining why we expect certain things is really important to kids. I remember growing up and asking why and being told because I said so. That was kind of, I think, the cliche, the big answer that everybody would say. And I was really looking forward to using that as an adult. And I get here and it doesn't work. So, but like that answer today doesn't work. You don't get to say that to kids.
Oh, just totally say it to my kids.
But like this, the kids, come up on our team. They may accept that answer, but they want to know why we're doing something, and they want the reason why. So rather than just say, hey, do it, kid, because I said to, it's like, well, this is why I want you to do that. And so then they're more likely to take ownership over that and then change that behavior or do whatever they, whatever it was that caused them to get benched. And like he said, we don't yell at kids for making mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes. And it's one of the things for me early on as a coach, and what I've tried to communicate to my assistant coaches, is that that kid didn't want to make a mistake. He didn't go out there and say, I want to drop the ball. Like, no player says that. He feels as bad about that as anyone. And so when a bunch of adults are screaming at him, hey, you got to put 2 hands up, like, that doesn't help him. He knows that he made a mistake, and he feels like the entire world is staring at him. He feels like he's the only person in the world in that moment. And so for us to make that worse as adults is really, really wrong. And So, we don't yell at kids for a mistake. If it's, now we may say, hey, that's all right. We're going to encourage him. And if there's something that we need to tell him, like, hey, that's okay. And then when he comes back in, say, listen, put two hands on the ball or do it this way. We can do that without screaming at him across the field and making him feel small. And that's really a big part of our coaching philosophy as well, and it goes back to the idea of this is a sanctuary. Like we're not making anyone feel small here. We want to lift people up, and a kid makes a mistake, he makes a mistake, but we're going to encourage him and put people around him to encourage him rather than try and tear him down, because he's tearing himself down.
Yep. And that goes back to a winning philosophy and a winning attitude. You got a kid that makes a mistake, and then you yell at him about that mistake, and then yell at him about the obvious of why he made the mistake instead of coaching and correcting course. He's going to make that mistake again because he's going to be dwelling on it. So the next ball hit to him, he's going to kick or bobble or whatever the case may be. So you're more likely to encourage errors by that kind of behavior, and that's really not a winning attitude. We do covet winning. We want to win. What team doesn't? We're out there to win a championship, but we're more importantly out there turning young boys into young men, and losing is part of that. You can't learn if you don't fail. So that's how we approach it, and I think it's a healthy way to approach it, and I think these boys are going to be better off in life because of it.
Hey, you guys remind me of, I don't know if it's a quote.
Gandhi, I know.
So yes, Gandhi.
You could go on a hunger strike. I think you could.
Oh man!
Wow,
that was not nice. Santa's watching. Santa's watching.
I'm sorry. You compared yourself to Gandhi. All right, let's not.
Something about I don't know if it was Gandhi who said this, but someone wise, something along the lines of people are measured by how they react to failure. Because winning and celebrating, those are so, not that winning's easy, but celebrating during the victories and the happy moments in life, those are so easy. But we tend to remember how people respond whenever it seems that the world's against them, whether that be they're having a bad day at work, they're struggling with a spouse or a family member, or they're not doing that well in a class. Some kind of obstacle is in the way, and how you handle it, that really is what defines you. And it sounds like that's what you want to instill in these boys, that you're going to have little tumbles in life, and how you react, you can let that define you, or you can dust yourself off and try again.
Yep. And it's a fine line, because we've all met those people in our lives that are just like overly happy and overly encouraging about every single thing, and very quickly that wears on you, and very quickly it's like, okay, you told me I looked great yesterday, and I had toilet paper on the bottom of my shoes, so did you mean that? Or it kind of loses its luster, right? And so as a coach, you can't just be that cheerleader every time a kid makes a mistake, because like I said, he knows he made a mistake. So if you're out there and you're like, you're great, you're the best, at some point that kid's gonna be like, you're just saying that, and it, at the same time, like I said, you don't criticize the kid. So instead, there's a line there of honest reflection and honest assessment, and then also packaged in encouragement to lift that person up, but also let them know these are the steps you need to take, or these are the things you have to do to get better. And again, that kind of gets back to that life thing. You can have one of those people in your life that just always says positive things to you, but if they're never honest with you, and you never reflect on what actually do I need to do to take the next steps in my life, or to make myself a better person, or help my situation out, then you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to have a box of motivational quotes, or a couple of self-help books that are just like, be the best you. But okay, I can only be the best me if I look at the bad parts of me and I try and fix parts, behavior, or whatever it might be, to kind of help me get to the next step.
And I think too, what's important is yes, we're encouraging them, but we're showing them what it looks like to be an encourager. Um, you know, you can have positive rhetoric, like Nate was saying, you have toilet paper on your shoe, or I'm reprimanding my daughter and I've got cheese in my beard. I mean, you can have whatever positive rhetoric that you want, um, but is that encouragement? And no, it's not. It's just positive rhetoric, and encouragement can be sometimes feel a little bit negative, but you're lifting somebody up as you're doing it, and we're teaching these kids how to be encouragers as well. So they're seeing what encouragement looks like from us, and then we're promoting them to go out and encourage their teammates. And then when they become adults and they're out in the world, they're hopefully encouraging their teammates at work or their family members. And I kind of put that out on Twitter every once in a while. Who have you encouraged today? Go and encourage. And it's about encouragement, lifting somebody up. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know the kind of problems they may have in their personal life. And especially in a time of social media, we're so quick and so easy to, well, you're an idiot, you're stupid, your opinion's crap. Well, how about instead we just talk it out and we encourage it. I love the passion that you have in your ideas. I think this is a better idea. That's encouragement while course correcting. And we're trying to teach that out to these guys as they become men. They can encourage others as hopefully we've encouraged them.
That is perfectly said, both of you. It's like anything in life. Like I have an English degree and I took creative writing classes. I didn't want my professors to crap on my work, but I also didn't want them to say, "Oh, you're the next Hemingway," huh? Like, what can I do better?
Right.
Where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? Because no one's perfect. Think about even completed works or finished games. How many armchair critics are there? I would have thrown this past, or I wouldn't have made the movie end this way.
Right.
Everybody, and like you were saying, Caleb, everybody has different opinions. And I was thinking that about the youth with social media. Every generation is going to have its things that people say, "Oh, I'm so glad this wasn't around when I was younger," or kids today. But I think the more things change, the more they stay the same. The concerns of the children today were probably the concerns of our parents, and even our concerns when we were kids, just slightly different, but the heart of it was there. And I do worry about social media, and I worry about the art of civil discourse, the art of debate. I think people have more in common than they realize.
Oh yeah,
I
take
agree.
the time. We might disagree on politics, we might disagree on religion, we might disagree on anything else, but I think people could find something, at least one thing in common with everybody.
Yeah. And that's one beautiful thing about having a team, is because you put 15 individuals together, and even if they're 15 individuals from the same school or from the same socioeconomic class, they're still going to have different opinions. And that's one of my favorite parts about a team is kind of culture building, if you want to call it that. And that's just the activities where we get together and there's nothing baseball related. It's just us trying to enjoy something, whether it's a barbecue or having kids over and cooking dinner for them, or having them over to
inflatable alien in our locker room.
Yeah, having a 6-foot inflatable alien in our locker room for no reason other than some kid brought it in and we put a uniform on it, or playing PlayStation with the guys. It's ways of building relationships with them, but also them building relationships with themselves, because high school was the same as it was when we were in high school, where you hang out with your group and that's it. And quite honestly, I've had kids on teams I've coached in the past, not necessarily at the school I'm at now, but where they've said, I love the baseball team, I'm also part of the basketball team, but the basketball guys only hang out with basketball guys, and the baseball guys, they hang out with everybody. And I love that, because I want our players to learn that you may not have the same interests, as everybody you're friends with, but have a variety of friends and learn to take in other opinions, learn to give your opinions in a respectful way, and learn to just enjoy, the commonalities and enjoy and embrace the differences, because that's what makes our culture beautiful, and that's what makes that's what makes humanity beautiful, is we might see the same event, but we both see it from different perspectives, and we can both help complete the picture to each other. And so I love teaching that to the kids, and it's a little we're not as diverse, obviously, in a team from a high school as other aspects of culture, but in the same way, we have a common goal and we have something to come together for. So you can definitely do that.
We really are Gandhi.
We should write a philosophy book. I don't know.
Gandhi's philosophy on coaching baseball.
Once I learn how to write, I think we might have something.
I think you know how to write.
No, listen, this is totally off topic, but I got my master's. I had to put together a portfolio, and it was like 70 or 80 pages of coaching philosophy and different things like that. And
Wow.
so I gave it to the English teacher at my school, and I was like, "Hey, can you be my proofreader? I'll pay you." And the marks that came back, I was so embarrassed. I was like, because she gives it back to me, and I'm like, "Listen, I'm not a great writer. I'm sorry. Please don't think bad of me." But so yeah. Anyways, we'll get an editor or somebody to write our book. So.
Well, I want to ask, because you mentioned about parents getting kind of volatile.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle those kind of challenges while coaching?
You want me to answer that?
Listen, that's all you, man. That's your department.
Well, as head coach, it usually is. But for me, okay, so one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from actually my college coach in Florida. His name is Raul Hernandez, and he's actually a high school coach and athletic director down there. And he told me one day, I called him for some advice, and I said, "Hey, coach, how do I?" And by the way, that's one thing I love about coaches and athletes is, once they're your coach, they're always your coach, and you can always call them for advice. And I love being that for our guys, and having that relationship. And that's one of the reasons to build the relationships, is so that you get that wedding invite one day, or you get those moments. And I love that. But anyways, I called him up and I said, "Hey, coach, I've got this issue. How would you deal with it? How do you deal with a parent who either wants to be too involved or gets too emotionally invested in things like that?" And he said, "A lot of coaches will tell you, keep parents at arm's length. You don't want parents in, it's your program. You don't want parents meddling around." And he said, honestly, what I do is I let parents in, and I let them see what we're doing. And that's kind of been my philosophy too. And I think that helps, because a lot of times that frustration that parents have, whether it be with umpires or the game or whatever it might be, I think a lot of that comes from kind of feeling like they're on the outside looking in and that they don't have control over it. And we see how people react when they don't feel like they have any control. And my message to parents every year when we have our beginning of the year meeting, we have a parent meeting. And every year I tell them, I have the same goal for your son as you do. You want your son to go to college and get a scholarship. I would love nothing more than for your son to go to college and get a scholarship. If you want your son to have fun playing in high school, I want your son to have fun playing in high school. Whatever it is, no matter what it is that you want for your son on this team, I guarantee you that I have the same goal, because I want what's best for your son, and I know that you want what's best for your son. So, I want you to feel like you're a part of this process, and if you ever have questions, I'm here for you. I'll answer whatever questions you have. And I try and give them a voice within the program. Obviously, they don't get to coach, and I think they respect that, but at the same time, it's my job to kind of make them feel like, one, they're heard because they're important, and two, that we're on the same team. And I tell them that too. I say, look, I'm never gonna talk bad about you in a practice. And I've been in practices where coaches have said, because a kid was late, well, what's your mom late again? Like, and kind of degrade or be rude about a parent to a student. And I'll tell my coaches, and I tell the parents, I'm never going to talk bad about your parenting style, your parenting decisions, anything like that, because that is your battle, and that you're the parent, not me, and so you're more important in this kid's life than I am. But the flip side of that is, on the ride home from practice, we're on the same team. Don't be bashing my coaches, like, well, Caleb doesn't know what he's talking about. He's teaching you that. That's not right, because then what that does to that kid is it confuses them, and it then puts that kid in a tough spot. And so, I try and just bring the parents in and let them realize we're on the same team and we're fighting the same battles. And part of that is we have a philosophy on our team where we don't complain about calls. Like, we don't complain about what the umpire says. Never in the history. I've watched a lot of sports. My wife could attest to that. I watched a lot of sports, and never in my life have I seen a player go up to a ref and say, "You missed that call. Change it." And the ref goes, "You know what? You are right. I made a mistake. Let me change that." It's never happened. And so because of that, complaining about that doesn't help. And if anything, it takes your mind off of, again, what you can control. You can't control what that person says. You can't control that person made a call that you think is bad. The only thing you can control is your reaction to that and then going forward. And so on our team, we're not allowed, as players, you're not allowed to make an excuse, and you're not allowed to let that affect you. You're not allowed to talk about the umpire making a bad call, because ultimately you have to be responsible for you. He's responsible for him, and we're going to let it play out. If he costs us a game, he costs us a game. We're not going to blame him for costing us the game. We're going to blame ourselves and look at what we could have done better. But that also bleeds over to the parents. And I don't legislate that with parents. I don't go to parents and say, you're not allowed to yell at the umpire. But I think they see the way that the players talk about it. They see that the players aren't allowed to complain about umpires. They see that the players kind of understand that relationship and understand that, what, this umpire is an authority figure, and so I'm not going to disrespect him. But beyond disrespect, I'm actually, he made a call. Maybe he made a mistake, but everybody makes a mistake. I make mistakes. And so I'm not going to complain about it. I'm going to let it go, and I'm going to get the next pitcher. I'm going to get the next time I'm up to bat, or whatever it might be. And so I think parents see that, and so then I think that kind of naturally just bleeds over to parents' behavior in the stands and some of their behaviors when it comes to complaining about umpires and things like that. And everybody gets emotional, and I understand that. And we've had discussions with parents when we've had to be like, maybe calm down a little bit. It's okay. But it's never gotten to that level, and I think part of it is because they see the culture that we're building within the team.
That's awesome. And I like what you said about people don't like to not have control. It's scary.
Yeah.
It is terrifying whenever things happen. And I find that whenever people are fearful, it's either fight or flight. And sometimes that fight comes out, that the screaming, the antagonizing. And we're all human. We've all had those moments, those days, whatever it is. And I love that you tell the parents, please don't badmouth me, just the same way I'm not going to badmouth you. Kids, it's not only is it disrespectful, even if you were coaching adults, but kids especially, they need people to look up to. They don't fully understand how the world is yet.
Yeah, and then they're put in a position, like I said, where it's, well, my dad said that he doesn't know what he's talking about, so should I listen to him or should I listen to my dad? And, it puts kids in an impossible position too. And, I don't want to do that to the kids.
Oh, that's awkward. Oh, gosh. It's like if a friend calls you and wants to complain about this other friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't hit me like this.
Yeah.
Well, what are some challenges you've seen or experienced with baseball in any capacity? Maybe you watched a game where something was went a little awry, or as you've both coached, that you've seen some challenges that you've had to overcome, or things you would have done differently?
Yeah, so one of the biggest issues that I see with baseball, and it kind of goes to, we won't get into the bigger issues of baseball leadership and things like that, but sadly, I think baseball, like you said, you brought up baseball and you said, it's wholesome. It's kids playing in the front yard or in the street, the sandlot, and that we talked about that. But sadly, that's not what baseball is anymore, and to a lot of people. And baseball is becoming very much a niche sport, I'm afraid, at times, and it's becoming a travel ball sport. And I think travel ball is great and it's a great opportunity, but basically travel ball is where you have these organizations that your parents pay a lot of money to, and then you travel around and you play baseball. Well, that is great unless your parents don't have a lot of money to pay, and you can't pay to play in that organization. And so one thing, we've come up against, even here in our town, the local league that was free for everyone to play in has kind of disbanded so that these travel organizations can happen, which is, again, is great if you can pay for that, but there's a lot of kids that are missing out that don't have that opportunity. And so for me, one of the things that Caleb and I have talked about, maybe remedies for this and things we can do to kind of help this, and we would love to, one day start our own league or do something, but we want to bring baseball to everybody. We don't want it to be exclusive. We don't want it to be exclusive to, kids that have money. We don't want it to be exclusive to kids that have, this. Not that, and that's not to talk bad about the kids that do, because it's not their, it's an advantage that they have, but it's not bad that their parents have money. But it also shouldn't mean that they're the only ones that get to play baseball. It should mean that everybody gets to play baseball, and everybody should get to learn these lessons. And so, for me, that's one of the biggest things is baseball's kind of slowly become that sport that's just for the wealthy in some parts of the country, and that's sad. And so, building more parks, teaching more kids the game, those are challenges that we try and overcome with that.
Yeah, that's the exact same for me. Going back to, again, we don't want to talk too much about leadership, but leadership in Major League Baseball, for example, isn't doing well growing the game domestically. They do great growing the game across the world. We're seeing more and more countries in the world being interested in baseball, while interest in the United States is starting to dwindle, especially in the inner cities. People just, they don't have that interest in baseball because it's not accessible. It's very easy to grab a basketball, go out to a public park, and shoot hoops. Basketball is extremely accessible in that. Baseball is a little bit more difficult, and then when you add on top of it these travel leagues that can be upwards of $14,000 to $20,000 a year, I mean, yeah, most families can't afford that. So now baseball has become a very wealthy sport where these kids may end up having an advantage. Now, there are some studies that show that these kids that are playing constantly year in, year out are actually at a disadvantage because their body breaks down quicker, their arms break down quicker, their elbow breaks down quicker. So they're less likely to make it to the big leagues. But even then, you've got all these kids that the only place you can play are these types of leagues where you've got to pay to play. It's not good for the game. We're seeing this especially locally in baseball and football, where some coaches are pushing that kind of model. So when they get up to certain levels, these kids have all played together their entire lives, which is also a disadvantage when it comes to baseball. But that's a challenge that we've not figured out yet as a sport. We've got to figure out a way to get past that and get over that without saying no travel leagues. I mean, you can't ban travel leagues, but if we can figure out a way, and there's some organizations like Lost Boys in Chicago that do a really good job with promoting the game in the inner cities, but that's just in Chicago. We need more organizations like that throughout the United States to really grow the game, and it falls on Major League Baseball, who I don't believe is doing a great job at promoting it.
Yeah, and to his point, basketball is extremely accessible. Football, the most popular sport. It's not a sport that kids can pick up a football and go play in the park, but like kids, the great part, one of the reasons why football grew so much is Pop Warner and these football leagues, where if a kid wants to play and his parents will sign the consent forms, a lot of times they're free or very, very low cost, and there's no travel involved in a lot of these. And so kids in the inner city or kids in rural America, or kids that don't have the money to play a travel sport, can play football, and it's no cost or very little cost to them. And whereas baseball, it's like, well, if you need a bat, and that's going to be a couple $100. You need a glove, and that's going to, and all these costs fall on the family, not on the organization. Whereas football, I played football growing up, and my mom never bought a helmet or pads. Those were provided to me. I played baseball growing up, and a bat was never provided, and a glove was never provided. That was equipment I had to buy myself. So again, my mom worked very hard so she could provide those things, but not everybody has that ability. And so not every kid can get a glove. Not every kid can get a bat. And Whereas in football, we give those. There's very little cost. Like I said, we give those items to the kids to use, and then we take them home. In baseball, you may have a coach that can do that, but a lot of times we don't give those things to the kids. We expect them to get them and show up to practice with a glove, or they're going to run a lap because they didn't bring their glove. And, no kid's going to come to practice and say, well, I don't have enough money to buy a glove. Kids are going to come in and they're going to say, I forgot my glove. Well, then maybe they didn't forget their glove. Maybe they don't have enough money to buy a glove. And so, that causes a whole other stream of issues. So, what I would love to see is organizations, and Major League Baseball has tried to do things in the inner city, and they've tried to do things with leagues, but I don't think it's been as extensive as it should have been. And I would love to see, more funding for things like, local leagues and leagues for players to be able to just play, whether they become great players or not, just the ability to go out and have fun and be in the fresh air. And part of that funding needs to be, look, we're going to give you gloves, we're going to give you bats, we're going to give you things so that kids can come and play and they don't have to meet any requirements. That's the thing about baseball, and that's the thing about, to me, growing up. When I played baseball in the neighborhood that I grew up in, there were no prerequisites. There wasn't anything required for me to be able to play that game. I could go out and play just because I was able to play. It had nothing to do with how much money anybody had. And that's what I love about baseball in the Dominican, like I said, with kids wearing, milk cartons on their hands as gloves. There's no prerequisites there either. It's if you can play, you can play. And we need to lower that bar, because right now there are prerequisites to be able to play the game of baseball, and I think that's heartbreaking. You can't play baseball if you don't have enough money for a glove. You can't play baseball if you don't have enough money for practice pants, for cleats, for a bat, for all these things, and that's wrong. We need to have it so that there isn't a prerequisite. You can play baseball because you can play baseball, whether you're a boy, whether you're a girl, whether you have money, whether you don't have money. It's open for everybody because it's a beautiful game, and life lessons can be taught.
Oh gosh, I think you bring up some really good points, and I don't think it's just baseball, because I noticed some of my coworkers, like, their kids do that travel league soccer, and it's even in dancing. There are, like, I used to, when I was growing up, I remember, my sisters went to their dance lessons once a week, but there's also those competitive dancing studios you can join, which costs money.
Yeah.
And got to travel with those, and it's again, it's, I guess it could, I hadn't thought about these points that you brought up with those aspects, just how not everybody's going to be able to play, and it's, I'm sure that's hard on parents to look at their kids and say, well, we don't have enough money for you to pursue your dream. And I know that some organizations, they do like World's Finest, fundraisers and stuff, but that's not really enough. And what if it's in the same neighborhood and a lot of the socioeconomic divide is there? Like, what if the neighbors don't really even have enough money to? Yeah,
I mean, if a kid lives in an impoverished area, giving him something to sell doesn't really help him, because, and one thing, I'm an athletic director as well, and one thing I'm always cognizant of is, if we're asking, fundraisers, first of all, I was a kid, and I remember fundraisers when I was a kid. A lot of times that just falls on your parents. It's like, hey, I've got to sell so much of this, and the parents are like, okay, I'll just sign a check if they can, right? And so, it's that's really what it comes down to a lot of times, is parents have to foot the bill, or even the neighborhood, and maybe they don't have the ability to raise money. So, it does cause issues. And you're absolutely right. I think soccer is the other big sport in America. And it's funny, because soccer is another sport where globally it's the opposite. Globally, anybody can play the game of soccer, and you see kids, playing on dirt patches with
barefoot.
Or they're barefoot and they're just playing because they love the game of soccer. And here in the States, it's like we have it backwards, and we want to put these restrictions on it. Like, you have to be on so many club teams, or you need to play certain. And I think what we're going to start seeing with baseball, and what we've seen with soccer when we play in the World Cup and things like that, is we're not getting our best athletes because we're putting so many requirements on it. And that's what's happening in soccer. And that's why, the U.S. missed the World Cup, because we we don't have the best players in the world, and we don't have the best players in the world because all of our athletes to play soccer have to meet certain requirements, and it's sadly becoming the same with baseball. I think.
I mean, if you look at Major League Baseball, some of the best players in Major League Baseball are foreign born, and especially Latin America, you've got a lot of people coming from the Dominican, and you're starting to see it sweep in Asia. A lot of Korean and Japanese players coming in and playing, and Canadian even. We aren't really the source of talent anymore, and it's those two sports, specifically soccer and baseball, that it's the most noticeable.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of that type of inaccessibility from the youth side. It's hard to grow up loving and playing a sport if you don't have access to it.
Yeah, and just a quick example here. I mean, the town we live in, it's the second biggest city in West Virginia. It's not massive or anything like that, but it's a large metropolitan area for for the state. And growing up, my brother played baseball growing up, and there were all these leagues, and he could play for free. And then I grew up, and I was able to play, and I never played travel ball because my mom couldn't afford it. So, that was never an option for me. So I was able to play though because there was a league, and it cost maybe $20 to sign up or whatever it was, but you got your uniform and you could play. And like I said, there were still things that we had to pay for, but it wasn't, we weren't paying thousands of dollars for a travel team. Well, this last year, even in this town, they got rid of that league. And so there's no league for kids that are in this town that want to play baseball. There's no league. The only option is one of the local high schools has created a league for their players. But if you're not in that district and you're not going to go to that high school, it's very much just for them. And so now there's no league in the city of Huntington for the kids to play. And I don't know how you can grow a game, and I don't know how you can say you love a game if you're willing to just exclude people because they don't live in your district and they're not going to be on your team one day. And that's one thing that I hate to see, and sadly I think it's happening in a lot more towns than just Huntington, West Virginia.
That what you guys are saying reminds me of something a friend once shared on social media years ago about she was, I don't know if she was tired of seeing people celebrated, but she was always, every time she saw someone accomplish something, she was always wondering how many people out there in the world, if they just had the money, the opportunities, whatever it may be, how many people could achieve great things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how much talent is out there that, it's just dying to get out, but there are no funds, there aren't any good people around them to help them reach those levels.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that, like what Caleb was saying, is the great part about baseball is it's a level playing field, but it's only a level playing field if there's a playing field. Yeah. It's only a level playing field. That only works if kids get to play, and the only way, like you're saying, that we can build that structure so that they can be successful and they can prove, how great they can be, is if we give them the opportunity to get through the door. If we stop them at the door and say, you don't meet our requirements, or you can't pay enough to play on our team and you can't be on the team, then you'll never know and you'll lose those kids. And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And it's hard to understand, well, why can't I do these things when you're a kid? It's,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
As an adult, you learn about sacrifice, but as a kid, when everything is amplified and everything feels like a bigger deal.
Yeah.
That's a tough conversation.
Definitely. It really is. And honestly, even within our town, our town is kind of known nationally, sadly, for an opioid epidemic that's going on in it. And so there are a lot of kids where, as a teacher, we see it, where there's a lot of kids that the only meal they eat is at school. They don't eat when they go home. They don't eat, at home because their parents, will spend money on drugs or they'll do different things. But those are the kids, if the parents aren't spending money on food, on the weekends for them to be able to eat, they're not going to spend the $15 or $25 or, they're not going to spend the thousands of dollars to put them in travel baseball. There's no way that they can play any sports if they don't have, if their parents, are that bad off. And so, we're fighting the drug epidemic here, and sadly the kids are the victims a lot of times of that. And, not that baseball fixes that, but it kind of gives them that sanctuary, if we can, to say, hey, yeah, things are really bad at home, and there's a lot going on, but we can put some positive things in your life using the game of baseball. So, those are some things that, and again, these are things that Caleb and I have talked about, and we've talked with local leaders about ways to try and implement a new league or different things. And so, hopefully we'll be able to do some things and get some concrete steps. But kind of the pandemic has kind of made that harder. But ultimately, the game of baseball can be that release for some kids, and especially kids that are really struggling.
This all goes back to your point that no man is an island, and it takes a village to ensure that everyone is taken care of and everyone's needs are met.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, you brought up the opioid epidemic, and that could be a whole other episode.
Really good.
I don't know. I think we as humanity need to do better for our fellow man. And oh man, I could get on a soapbox about things, and I'll leave it as I think there needs to be more love in the world, and more help.
Absolutely.
Yes, be careful, be wary, so you're not brought down or hurt, or your loved ones aren't hurt, but less judgment.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I could go on a tangent about that. But to kind of wrap it up, so you guys have talked about baseball and your coaching philosophies and so many other just fantastic topics around this sport. But what are some things that people can expect from your podcast? If they would turn it on today, what are some episodes you'd like to talk about?
Forgot we had a podcast.
Well, honestly, we've hit a lot of the things. Local baseball is something we've talked about. We've talked about, we've had episodes. We do a little bit of everything. I think we even mentioned this at one point, whether it's sandlot baseball or the major leagues, we're willing to talk about it as long as it's baseball. And because we think baseball is a metaphor for life, and because we think baseball is kind of a lifestyle in a way, we ingrain we weave baseball into life topics. And so we'll, whether it's talking about sandlot baseball or whether it's talking about movies, one of the coolest episodes for me that we had a Father's Day episode, and we did it on, we talked about the movie Field of Dreams, and we interviewed Dwyer Brown, who is an actor that was in that movie, and we were able to interview him. Another one was we were able to interview Jim, the Rookie Morris, from the movie, Disney movie The Rookie, and he came on our podcast, and that was really cool. So, we have these episodes where we'll talk about movies, or we'll talk about, baseball life, or we'll talk about coaching, we'll talk about the major leagues. And, really just if you like baseball at all, even in a little bit, or even if you just like listening to guys, get on each other's case and make fun of each other and have a good time, I think those are some of the things you can definitely expect when you tune into our podcast.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad spectrum. I mean, we'll go from the development side, looking at coaches and talking to guys about how to fix this behind the plate, or fix this at the plate or on the mound, or whatever the case may be. And we'll look at history and go back and look at what minor league teams are doing, or we've had episodes with minor league players. Our first interview was with a player named Tim Dillard, a guy that we both love, and he's got a big social media presence, pretty funny guy, and we enjoyed talking to him. But it's a little bit of everything. If you want to hear about the game of baseball, we'll have something for you. Whether it's marketing from a t-shirt standpoint, we had an episode with a guy from a shirt company called Obvious Shirts out of Chicago, to like Nate was saying, with Dwyer Brown from Field of Dreams, who played Kevin Costner's dad, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. You guys are listing off like, oh, we're just a small podcast, but you have all these big people.
Yeah. That's the thing about baseball is it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, or what you're doing now. Baseball is baseball.
Yeah.
So if you get somebody like Dwyer Brown, who was a huge role in a massively popular film about the game of baseball, he's going to want to talk about baseball.
Yeah.
And that's just it transcends everything. It doesn't matter where you come from or how much money you have or who you are now. Baseball is baseball, and most baseball fans just want to talk about baseball with other baseball fans.
It kind of just goes back to that relational aspect of just talking baseball and having a good time. And so that's, and that's honestly been one of the biggest surprises, I think, with having the podcast has been people's willingness. Like the first couple months we had it, when it was like, Caleb would text me and be like, dude, I got, so-and-so for the podcast. Or I would say, I was able to get so-and-so to come on our podcast. It was like, why are these people talking to us? I mean, honestly, but it's like because
Bob Kendrick.
Yeah, it's because the baseball community is so genuine and so open and willing to talk and just talk the game of baseball and grow the game of baseball. I think that's great. So, all of those things are things you can see on our podcast. We're actually
here on the podcast.
Sorry. We're actually kind of in a transition period because of COVID and different things. We haven't recorded an episode in a little while because of one, baseball's been over, but also just having to distance and things like that. And so we're actually going to go to more of a seasonal format. So we're going to have a season with about 30 episodes, and then have a little bit of a time off that I think is going to make it a little bit easier to be kind of regular with it. But even in just the episodes that we've put out and trying to grow it, it's been pretty cool for sure.
So do you guys fanboy a little bit whenever someone agrees to do a podcast episode?
Oh, definitely. There's been multiple times when I've been very, very nervous going into an interview to talk to somebody, because it's like, I Jim the Rookie Morris, was one of my favorite movies growing up, and it was like, man, you were the actual guy that's based off of. Like, Dennis Quaid played you in a movie. Like, that's
you pitched in Major League Baseball at like 40 years old, and it was amazing.
Yeah, so these guys are, anytime you meet somebody like that, it's super cool. And it is hard not to kind of fanboy out and just, remember that you have to be professional and ask questions and
But it was kind of like that with the Pelicans. We did an on location episode with the Pelicans, and I just shot them a message on Twitter, just shooting my shot, and they responded, well, if you're in town, come on to the ballpark. We'll do an interview with the entire front office, and we'll take you on a tour. I'm like, sure. So me and Nate ended up going on vacation at the same time. It was kind of dumb luck, to be honest with you, and I found out that he was going down to Myrtle Beach the same week I was going to Myrtle Beach. We set it up, and it ended up being one of our favorite episodes where we talked to the entire front office of a minor league baseball team, which was amazing.
Yeah, really cool access. So
I can't think of anything more serendipitous than that. Like,
yeah.
See, kids, just shoot your shot, take your chances. So the worst thing someone can do is say no or ignore you, but they can also respond.
Worst thing that can happen is they'll say no.
Yep.
That is so awesome. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add for listeners to know about either coaching, meetings on the mound, baseball? Oh, I have a question. I just thought of it. So if you are at a baseball game, what is your menu of choice? What are you going to be eating and drinking?
So, for me, I'm probably I like a hot dog at the ballpark. That's kind of the classic answer. But
dude, do not say Skyline Chili.
No, I don't like Skyline Chili. When I was a kid,
Skyline Chili.
So it's Cincinnati chili. And Cincinnati's kind of famous for it. I think there was even a Simpsons episode here recently.
Cincinnati is famous for bad chili. Just think about that.
There was a Simpsons episode here recently where they went to Cincinnati and Skyline chili was featured. It's kind of their thing in the East. It's kind of known as that. It's basically chili they put on spaghetti, but Cincinnati and
Okay.
I don't like it. My brother likes it. I love the city of Cincinnati. That's kind of my adopted, home away from home. But I can't stand it. So I don't like their chili. But anyways, for me, it's probably I like a hot dog. But for whatever reason, when I was younger, I would always get pizza at the ballpark. A slice of La Rosa's pizza in the Reds ballpark. So I think for that, because it was always what I would get as a kid, it's just kind of stuck with me that that's what I'll get. So I always get like a slice of pizza, and then I usually just drink a Diet Coke or something like that. But that's usually just kind of my menu of choice. I think kind of going back to when I was a kid, that's kind of why. With the souvenir cup. When my wife and I got married, I think I had maybe 15 souvenir cups, and she was like, we can get rid of these. And I was like, why would we get rid of them? They're perfectly good cups. Just because I got it at a ballpark and it's got a player on the side of it, and
it makes it even better.
We have since we've since said goodbye to some of those souvenir cups, but I've got a couple.
Now, it's hard with ballpark food. There's some ballparks that have like really awesome cuisines, but it's hard if you've never really been there, never really experienced it. My go-to, it's kind of boring. It's just a bratwurst or a hot dog, and then whatever soda's on tap there. If it's a Coke or a Dr. Pepper or whatever the case may be, it's very boring. We're there to watch a ball game, I guess. So, hot dog and soda, I guess.
Keeping it easy. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share or add on?
Just love other people, be kind to others, and try and make an impact on people's lives, whether you're a coach or not. And always reach out and help your teammates. And you don't have to be on a team, like you said. It's a village, and so whether you're on a team or not, reach out to those around you and let them know you love them, and let them know you're there for them. And the principles we've kind of talked about, they correlate to life too. So be that for those people.
Yeah, and if you want to listen to the two Gandhis of baseball, check out Meetings on the Mound. Yep.
And they can find you guys on Apple Podcasts?
Yep. I believe pretty much anywhere. We're also on Google Play and different places. So wherever you find your podcast, you can probably find us, Stitcher, places like that. But the most common, Spotify. I think Spotify as well. The most common place is Apple Podcast. And we also have a Twitter account that will tweet out links to our podcast as well as some videos and silliness. So that's at Mound Pod. At Mound Pod. So
get it right, dude.
Awesome. And do you guys have any social media presence you would like to share? Yeah. You want to kind of keep that private?
That's fine. I mean, like I said, there's not a lot on there that'll excite people, but at Nate_Hale is my Twitter handle.
And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Caleb G. Webb. You can find all kinds of fun videos of me scaring my wife on Marco Polo.
Yeah. The fact that you're still married is remarkable. Your poor wife.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, Caleb and Nathan, I can't thank you enough. This was a really passionate episode. I really enjoyed learning about everything. The coaching, the games, just the philosophies. It ended up being about a lot more than just the sport itself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you so much. Yep. It was a blast.
Yeah,
for sure.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, anytime. Thank you guys so much. Well, listeners, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, Boss Rush Games. This is part of the expansion pack on Fridays. And until next time, see you later. Bye-bye.